So starting around 2 years ago, I'm really hitting a bit of a crescendo the last year with the coronavirus restrictions, both in terms of travel and opening, has been the number of inquiries that I've received from guys who don't just want to travel here in Ukraine, but actually want to live at least 3 months of the year in Ukraine, whether it happens to be in Kiev, Odessa, where I am right now, Dnipro, maybe it's Kharkov, maybe it's Lviv. So in today's Tip Thursday with me, Connor Klein, I'm going to go into the 5 types of Western guy that moved to Ukraine. These are guys that I just met casually, clients that I've helped in person with moving here, and some guys that I actually try to avoid when I'm here. So let's get into it. Поехали! So the first kind of Western guy that you are likely to bump into, maybe not the first one you actually physically bump into, but the most kind of, I guess, historically common since Ukraine became an independent country, is the Russophile / Ukrainophile, as it's become maybe a little bit more popular recently. So it's guys who have studied Russian at university maybe, or taken maybe a business degree with a focus on the former Soviet Union, or like I did, international relations, an MA in that with a focus on the former Soviet Union. They've studied Russian to a certain extent. Now more recently, as I said, you may also have studied Ukrainian. You also have guys who are interested in learning Ukrainian, maybe because they have ancestry here, especially in the west of the country, and they tend to be drawn here for the obvious reason that they have a skill set that's quite interesting to have, obviously, if you're doing business here, and they've been genuinely interested in the culture and the politics or just the economy here for a long number of years. Now, sliding across to the second type of Western guy is, well, most Russophiles or Ukrainophiles also notice the plethora of beautiful women here in Ukraine, not just in Ukraine, but in the former Soviet Union. And whilst their primary motivation might be the language and the culture, obviously not adverse to that as well, pretty girls. And that's a segue into the second type of Western guy, which is like the sexy Slavic girl playboy, right? So it's guys who are not particularly interested in the culture per se, outside of the fact that there are beautiful women here. Now you may also derogatorily refer to them as sexpats. I think that's maybe a little unfair from the stereotype of what a sexpat is. That's normally someone who's paying commercial sex when they're living in a poor country, for example. So I wouldn't classify them as that, but they basically don't really have a great interest in the country outside of the women. They spend a lot of time here, been coming for many years, never bothered normally to learn the language, don't really do any business here. They may pretend that that's why they're here, but in reality they don't. And of course, if all the women left here, they'd also be on the next boat, or more likely not a boat across the Black Sea, but on the next flight out of here for somewhere else. So as an afterthought for the first 2 types of Western guys that you're likely to bump into here in Ukraine, we're reminded of something a friend of mine, an Italian friend of mine, Luigi, said to me many moons ago. Siamo venuti per le ragazze, ma siamo rimasti per l'atmosfera qua in Ukraine. So something along the lines of we came for the chicks, but we stayed for the vibe here in Ukraine. And the third type of Western guy that you are likely to meet is an Italian guy that I bumped into quite literally in a bar here in Dnipro over the weekend, and he is the digital nomad. And this is obviously a pretty new phenomenon in the sense that digital nomadism has developed quite gradually, but probably exploded in the last 2 years in particular. And you bump into a lot of digital nomads. Now, of course, we have a little bit of a gray what's a digital nomad, especially with this pandemic. A lot of people are able to work remotely, but maybe don't consider themselves digital nomads. Well, the typical profile, and this doesn't go for every digital nomad, is especially here in Ukraine, it's going to be a guy, almost certainly, not a girl, going to be a guy if he came to Ukraine, who is normally, we'll say, between maybe 25 to 40, is starting out obviously and making money pretty much, and is probably got, you know, somewhere between 3 to 10,000 US dollars a month in income that he's able to work online, and he can basically move around and live this kind of travel lifestyle and make good money, but not good enough money to have a lavish lifestyle, say in the West, in Western Europe, like in Paris or London or in New York, and not enough money to be a real baller here in Ukraine, because there are spectacularly wealthy Ukrainians as well. So this kind of baller level, they would be priced out of both that and kind of a lavish lifestyle, luxury lifestyle in the West. So they use that arbitrage opportunity to move between countries across the globe where the cost of living is cheap, because they have that freedom. So a lot of them would be in Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, in Bali, in Thailand, and you have a certain number of them who come here to Ukraine. So what are the kind of stereotypical characteristics that they have? A bit like the Slavic, sexy Slavic girl playboy types. They're not interested in the culture here. They are drawn by a lot of the benefits of coming to Ukraine, which is the low cost of living and the fact that they're single guys, so they are looking for pretty girls, right? So this is the main reason why they take Ukraine. I would say maybe 5 years ago, a lot of these guys would have based themselves in Hungary, but they've now come further east because it's cheaper here, and I would argue that women are prettier in Ukraine than Hungary. That's just my taste. They tend to almost exclusively hang out with other digital nomads, I would say, who then use English. They go on lots of dates with girls. They kind of, you know, plow through Tinder or plow through a bar, as I saw these guys doing over the weekend, just talking to every girl. And they're not really putting down any roots here because they can move so freely, and they're not that committed to Ukraine or its culture. They're here because of those two main factors, which are great factors to come here, of course. But what happens to a lot of them is that they get scammed a lot, but they do tend to get caught out. They tend to rely on being a Westerner a lot to try and attract girls, and you know, there's a lot of girls who just do the very light restaurant scam here, and they tend to, you know, exploit these kind of guys a lot. I hear a lot of them complain about it. So yeah, they're not really committed to Ukraine as well, and it's not just about obviously the girls and stuff, it's more that cost of living is one of the big attractions here for them. That brings me on to the fourth type of Western guy that I help a lot as clients here in Ukraine. That is more the baller business owner, right? Who's able to manage his business remotely enough that he can spend 3 to 12 months a year here in Ukraine. And these guys typically make, you know, they have well in excess of 10K, which is, you know, obviously there's a bit of a blurry line between digital nomad and just being a remote business owner. But we'll say, from what I can see in terms of groups of people, these guys come, they have a lot more cash, first of all. So we'll say a minimum 10K, but normally way in excess of that. They're here to live a baller lifestyle. They can afford it. They can also afford it actually in the West pretty much as well. And they are interested in maybe not putting down roots in the sense they're going to live the rest of their lives here, but they normally invest in real estate. They make a lot of connections and friends with local people, both guys and girls, because you know they want to reap the benefits of investing in a network here. And they're looking to kind of 5x their lifestyle, which is what I often talk about in these videos, because they obviously, and most of them are also single men, so they also take advantage of kind of the beauty arbitrage of moving to Eastern Europe, but they do tend to have a lot of value. They don't tend to get caught out as much by scammers, I would say, and they don't exclusively hang out in groups of just expats, I guess English-speaking expat bubble. They try to keep away from that kind of scene, but they definitely have come here strategically to maximize their lifestyle, as opposed to, hey, it's cheap, I'm making this money online, let's go hang out in Ukraine for a while. They're pretty focused on investing and getting the most out of their experience here. And that brings me on to the fifth type of a Western guy that you're likely to meet. It's a little bit different. It's again, we're kind of segueing on. And I would see it as guys who are kind of independently wealthy, maybe not really running a business. Now, there might be crypto guys who made a lot in cryptocurrencies recently and are cashing out. And I know that obviously investing is work. It's not like they don't do anything to make that money, obviously, but they're cashing out of it. So they're kind of taking the money that they've earned, and now they're going to settle here in Ukraine. And maybe they're going to do something in the future, like invest in business or something else, but they're not going to really run a business remotely from here, and they're not a digital nomad who's going to be traveling around to lots of different places, kind of like a drifter or something like that. It can also be retirees. And well, I guess if you cash out of crypto, you're at the age of 25, you can also retire, but maybe older guys as well, maybe up to the boomers side, 55 plus, who decide to relocate here to Ukraine because, again, the cost of living differential is very attractive, and maybe they don't have ties keeping them to the US or Western Europe, so they decide this is the place to move to. So these guys tend to be, a little bit similar to the kind of remote business owner baller guys, since they have a substantial amount of money and can live a lifestyle here, but they're not going to run a business. They might be, normally they're planning long term. They buy, again, real estate, invest in that here, and then live out a lot of their life here. So also they want to have local friends. Also, I help a good few of those guys with my program, Slavic Utopia Secrets Ukraine, also on consulting calls. So if you are interested in, well, you watched until the end of this video about what kind of other Western guys move here, so I'm guessing you are interested in spending 3 to 12 months a year here in Ukraine. You're going to need an optimal visa strategy, because for most of us, we get 90 days visa free every 180, which means that you can come for 3 months, but then you got to leave for 3 months to come back. So you need a strategy to get around that, which is basically getting a visa, temporary or permanent residency. Also have a primer video on that that'll link up above and below. And in my program, we go into that and we figure out exactly what is your optimal visa strategy for spending more than 3 months here a year, or per 6 months. And we dive into, as I mentioned, the real estate market. That is a huge draw here, because there are massive opportunities in terms of the cost of real estate versus the West. It's massive difference. Also, you're going to have a strategy to overcome the language barrier if you're spending a lot of time here. Also, huge business opportunities here in Ukraine, stuff that's already been validated in the West, hasn't been implemented, going to go into that. And also the medical system, kind of an important one, especially for the guys who are maybe thinking of retiring, but that becomes a higher priority. We go into, obviously, again, the cost of getting medical procedures here done in Ukraine is a fraction of the West, so you also have a good bit of medical tourism for that reason. But also we go into having, what to do in an emergency and stuff like that, and to set yourself up for making the most of the health system here, and basically how to come here and 5x your lifestyle. It's on demand, that program. I'm going to link it down below. Maybe you prefer, like some of my consulting clients, just to jump on a call and have a consulting call. We can also do that together. So I'll link that down below as well in the description. And if you're not on my mailing list, my free mailing list, that is where I unveil my new programs, my new premier programs to help guys with 5xing their lifestyle in general here in Eastern Europe. And you need to be on my free mailing list in order to be notified when I open those up for enrollment, because I only allow my most loyal fans in on that when it starts out. So down below, there's going to be also a link to get on my free mailing list, and in exchange there is a free gift there. It's my Zara's hotspots to cities like Kiev and Odessa. Also got Minsk there if you're thinking of maybe taking a short hop over to neighboring Belarus. So let me know down in the comments as well if you are a Westerner who's moved to Ukraine and you fit into one of those 5 categories, or maybe you're a blend of 2, or you start out one and became the other, or you think there are other categories that I should have mentioned. I didn't talk about, say, the sexpat, because I think that's become a little bit a thing of the past here in Ukraine. You don't see those kind of guys here. Guys who are looking just to hang out somewhere is cheap and pay hookers basically for sex. Those guys tend to go to Latin America and Southeast Asia. I don't see that so much. Of course, there's some of it. There's this, of course, sex tourism here. Also, another thing, you don't see the phenomenon of the loser back home so much. There would be guys who maybe take up an English teaching job, didn't have much going on from back home, suddenly end up somewhere where just speaking English is a huge advantage, and then they kind of get higher social status. Anyways, there's kind of people use that term to describe, especially a lot of expats move to, say, Southeast Asia or China. I've seen it used, but again, don't really see those guys so much here in Ukraine. But maybe you've seen something different or met different people. Anyways, let me know all that good stuff down below in the comments. That is end of today's video. Got a beautiful evening on the banks of the river Dnipro in the city of Dnipro in the center of the country. So I bid you a do побачення, до свидання, до встречи. Ciao, ciao.
SAR Experience.